the breaking point. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the cramped apartment at 5:30 a.m. Amelia Chen rolled over, her body aching from another restless night spent worrying about bills, about Danny, about tomorrow. She padded softly to her son's room, where 8-year-old Danny lay curled beneath his weighted blanket, his dark hair tousled against the pillow. "Morning, sweetheart," she whispered, gently stroking his forehead. Danny's eyes fluttered open, and she could see the familiar signs of anxiety already creeping in. Changes to routine were hard for him, and today would be particularly challenging. "Mama, is Mrs. Patterson coming today?" Danny asked, referring to his usual caregiver. Amelia's heart sank as she remembered the late-night phone call from the YT. Elderly woman, apologizing profusely about her sudden flu symptoms. "No, honey, Mrs. Patterson is sick, but we'll figure something out." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She'd already called everyone she could think of. Her brother David was traveling for work. Her neighbor had her own family crisis. And the respite care center had a waiting list weeks long, as she helped Danny through his morning routine. Carefully following the sequence that kept his world stable, Amelia's mind raced through impossible options she couldn't afford to miss. Another day of work. Mr. Harrison, her supervisor at Pinnacle Consulting, had already made it clear that her family complications were becoming a problem. The company prided itself on professionalism above all else. Single mothers with special needs children apparently didn't fit that image. By 7:30 a.m., with Danny finally dressed and calm, Amelia made the decision that would change everything. She packed his noise-canceling headphones, his favorite sensory toy, and his tablet loaded with educational games. "Danny, how would you like to see where Mama works today?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light and cheerful. "The bus ride, too." Downtown was mercifully quiet. Danny sat pressed against her side, watching the city wake up through the window. His autism made him hypersensitive to crowds and noise, but he'd always found comfort in observing patterns, the rhythm of traffic lights, the predictable stops. Of the bus route, Pinnacle Consulting occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower. Amelia had worked there for 3 years, handling client communications and scheduling with quiet efficiency. She'd never brought personal problems to work, never complained about the long hours or demanding clients. Today, she prayed that track record would buy her some understanding. She settled Danny in the small break room with his headphones and tablet, explaining in the gentle, clear voice she used for important instructions that he needed to stay quiet. And still, he nodded solemnly, already absorbed in his game. For 2 hours, the plan worked perfectly. Danny remained content in his corner, occasionally looking up to give her a small wave through the glass partition. Amelia handled phone calls, managed appointments, and greeted clients with her usual warm professionalism. Then Mr. Harrison returned. From his client meeting earlier than expected. "Chen, what exactly is that child doing in my office?" His voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. "Every head in the open plan office turned toward them, sir. I can explain. My child care fell through this morning, and you thought this was an appropriate solution." Harrison's face was flushed with anger. "This is a professional workplace, not a daycare center. Do you have any idea how this looks to our clients?" Danny, startled by the raised voices, had removed his headphones and was standing in the break room doorway, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. Amelia's heart broke seeing him like that, vulnerable and exposed in this harsh, unwelcoming environment. "Please, Mr. Harrison, he's not bothering anyone. I just need today to arrange alternative care. You need to arrange alternative employment." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Clear out your desk. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. The office fell silent, except for the gentle hum of computers and Danny's quiet whimpering as he pressed himself against Amelia's side. She looked around at her coworkers, some avoiding her gaze, others watching with uncomfortable sympathy. None spoke up. With shaking hands, Amelia gathered her few personal items while Danny clutched her jacket. The walk to the elevator felt endless, every step echoing her failure. In the lobby, she knelt down to Danny's level. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're going home now." As the elevator doors closed on 3 years of her life, Amelia held her son close and wondered how she would explain to him that sometimes No matter how hard you try, the world simply isn't built for families like yours. The silent observer Marcus Whitfield had built his fortune on reading people, understanding their motivations, recognizing potential where others saw problems, identifying the human stories behind business transactions. Today, sitting in the marble-clad lobby of Pinnacle Consulting, he was supposed to be reviewing quarterly projections for a potential acquisition. Instead, he found himself captivated by a quiet drama unfolding near the reception desk. The woman, handling the phones, moved with practiced efficiency, her voice warm and professional as she managed what appeared to be a complex scheduling crisis for a demanding client. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her competence, though that was evident, but the way she occasionally glanced toward a small figure, barely visible through the glass partition of a nearby break room. Mr. Whitfield, Rebecca Torres, his assistant, appeared beside his chair with a tablet full of meeting notes. "They're ready for us upstairs." "Give me another minute," Marcus murmured, his eyes still on the scene before him. The child in the break room was perhaps 8 or 9, absorbed in what looked like an educational tablet, wearing oversized headphones. Something about his posture, carefully contained, hyper-aware of his surroundings, reminded Marcus of his younger brother Simon, who had struggled with severe social anxiety throughout their childhood. The morning proceeded smoothly until Marcus heard raised voices cutting through the lobby's polished tranquility. He looked up from his documents to see a red-faced man in an expensive suit standing over the receptionist, his voice carrying clearly across the marble expanse. "This is a professional workplace, not a daycare center." Marcus watched as the woman's face flushed with embarrassment, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to respond. The child had emerged from the break room, moving to stand protectively close to his mother. The boy's movements were careful, deliberate. Marcus recognized the signs of a child accustomed to navigating a world that felt too loud, too bright, too unpredictable. "You need to arrange alternative employment." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd witnessed corporate cruelty before, had probably been guilty of it himself in his earlier, more ruthless years, but something about this moment felt different. The woman's dignity in the face of public humiliation. The way she immediately knelt to comfort her frightened son. The quiet strength in her voice as she whispered reassurances. It stirred something in Marcus that he thought he'd long since buried. "Mr. Whitfield." Rebecca's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Sir, are you all right?" Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound drew several glances, but he barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the mother and child making their way toward the elevator, the woman's arm protectively around her son's shoulders. "Cancel the meeting," he said quietly. "Sir, cancel the meeting, Rebecca. Tell them something came up. Something more important than quarterly projections." Rebecca Torres had worked for Marcus Whitfield. For 6 years, she'd seen him navigate hostile takeovers with ice-cold precision, watched him pivot entire business strategies on instinct, witnessed his legendary ability to spot opportunities others missed. But she'd never seen him look like this, shaken, almost vulnerable. "Of course, Mr. Whitfield. Should I reschedule for next week?" "No." Marcus was already moving toward the security desk, his mind racing. "I need you to find out everything you can about that woman, the receptionist who just got fired. Her name, her address, her employment history." Quietly, Rebecca followed his gaze to the elevator doors as they slid shut. "Sir, may I?" "Brother Simon," Marcus said suddenly, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "When we were kids, he had what they called selective mutism back then. Couldn't speak in public, couldn't handle crowds or unexpected changes. My parents were impatient with what they saw as weakness." He paused, remembering 12-year-old Simon hiding in closets during family gatherings. The way their father would drag him out, demanding he act normal. The private schools that asked them to consider alternative placements. The slow erosion of a sensitive child's confidence under the weight of a world that had no patience for his differences. One day, when he was about that boy's age, my mother took him to her office because his school had suspended him for having a panic attack in class. Her boss humiliated her in front of the entire staff, said she needed to choose between her career and her problem child. Marcus's jaw tightened at the memory. She chose her career. Simon spent the rest of his childhood shuffled between relatives, in boarding schools, none of which understood him. Rebecca had never heard Marcus speak about his family. In 6 years, she'd learned more about his personal life in these past 5 minutes than in all their previous conversations combined. She made a different choice, Marcus continued, nodding toward where the elevator had been. That woman chose her son. That bastard punished her for it. What do you want me to do? Rebecca asked, already reaching for her phone. Find her, Marcus said simply, and then help me figure out how to make this right. Within 2 hours, Rebecca had assembled a comprehensive file. Amelia Chen, 28 years old, single mother. 3 years at Pinnacle consulting with exemplary performance reviews until recently. Her son Danny had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at age 3. No family support system beyond an older brother who traveled frequently for work. Living paycheck to paycheck in a 1-bedroom apartment across town, Marcus studied the information with the same intensity he brought to market analysis. But this time, the data points represented a life a woman trying to build stability for herself and her child in a system that seemed designed to tear families like theirs apart. Sir, Rebecca said carefully, what exactly are you planning? Marcus looked up from the file, and for the first time in hours, he smiled. It wasn't his usual calculated business smile, but something warmer, more genuine. I'm planning to do something my family never did for Simon. I'm planning to prove that the world can be different. Better. Closed the folder and stood. Set up a meeting with Grace Kim in HR. Tell her we're expanding our inclusive hiring initiative. And then help me figure out the right way to approach a woman who just learned that showing up for her child costs everything. Outside the towering windows of Pinnacle Consulting, the city hummed with its usual indifference. But in that moment, Squitfield felt the stirrings of something he hadn't experienced in years, the possibility that success could mean more than profit margins. That power could be used for something greater than acquisition, and that sometimes the most important business decisions had nothing to do with business at all. A door opens 3 days after the worst morning of her life. Amelia Chen sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by rejection letters and job applications. The familiar weight of despair settling over her shoulders like an old, unwelcome coat. Annie was having a particularly difficult day of the disruption. To his routine had triggered a series of meltdowns that left them both exhausted. The savings account that was supposed to last 2 months was already dwindling after just 72 hours. The knock at her apartment door came at 10:17 a.m., interrupting her practiced recitation of her qualifications to yet another automated phone system. Through the peephole, she saw a professionally dressed woman with kind eyes and graying hair, holding what appeared to be a business card. Miss Chen. My name is Grace Kim. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Whitfield Technologies. I was wondering if I could speak with you for a few minutes. Amelia's hand hesitated on the door chain. Whitfield Technologies, she'd heard of them, of course. Everyone in the tech hub had. They were the company that had revolutionized accessibility software. It's the one that made headlines for their inclusive workplace policies. What could they possibly want with her? I'm sorry, Amelia said through the door, suddenly conscious of her 3-day-old pajamas and unwashed hair. I think there's been some mistake. There's no mistake, Grace replied gently. We'd like to offer you a position with our company. May I come in? The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. Amelia fumbled with the chain lock, her hands shaking as she opened the door to reveal Grace Kim, a woman whose warm smile immediately put her at ease. I know this is unusual, Grace continued as Amelia gestured her toward the small living room, but we believe exceptional circumstances call for exceptional approaches. From his corner of the room, Danny looked up from his blocks, studying this new person with the careful attention he gave to anything that disrupted his environment. Grace noticed him immediately and offered a small wave, which Danny acknowledged, with a tiny nod before returning to his precise arrangements. He's building a pattern, Amelia explained automatically. The defensive explanation she'd given countless times to teachers, neighbors, strangers who didn't understand. It's beautiful, Grace said, and she meant it. My nephew Kevin does something similar with his Lego sets. The symmetry is remarkable. Something in Amelia's chest loosened slightly. Most people saw Danny's repetitive behaviors as strange or concerning. Grace saw art. Miss Chen, I'll be direct. We heard about what happened at Pinnacle Consulting. Our CEO, Marcus Whitfield, was actually in their lobby that morning. Amelia's face flushed with fresh embarrassment. Oh, I see. What you might not see is how impressed he was with your composure, your professionalism, and your dedication to your son. He asked me to track you down because Whitfield Technologies is always looking for people who demonstrate that kind of character under pressure. Grace pulled out a tablet and opened to what appeared to be a job description. We have an opening for a client relations coordinator in our accessibility division. The position involves working with families who use our adaptive technology products, helping them navigate support services, connecting them with resources. The salary is 60% higher than what you are making at Pinnacle, with full benefits including comprehensive health care. Amelia stared at the screen, the numbers blurring slightly as tears gathered in her eyes. I don't understand.
How did you even find me?
Marcus Whitfield built this company on the principle that everyone deserves access to opportunity, regardless of their circumstances or challenges. When he saw you that morning, he saw someone who embodies those values. Grace's voice was steady, professional, but tinged with genuine warmth. Besides, we've discovered that parents of children with disabilities often make our most effective advocates for accessibility. They understand the stakes in a way others simply can't. But I don't have experience in technology. You have experience in problem solving, in advocating for someone who can't always advocate for himself, in finding creative solutions when conventional ones fail. Trust me, those are the skills that matter most in this role. Danny had abandoned his blocks and moved closer, drawn by the gentle tone of Grace's voice. She turned her attention to him with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to interacting with children who saw the world differently. Danny, right. I have a friend at work named Tommy Rodriguez who has a daughter about your age. She loves building patterns too, but with computer code instead of blocks. Would you like to meet her? Sometime? Danny looked to his mother for permission before nodding slowly. The fact that he was engaging at all with a stranger spoke volumes. Grace had an intuitive understanding of how to approach him without overwhelming his senses. There's more, Grace continued, turning back to Amelia. Our company has an on-site childcare center, but more importantly for your situation, we also have a specialized program for children with developmental differences. It's not babysitting, it's therapeutic support integrated into the workday. Danny would have access to occupational therapy, speech therapy if needed, and educational programming designed specifically for children on the autism spectrum. Amelia felt as if she was dreaming. After 3 years of struggling to balance Danny's needs with work demands, after countless conversations with supervisors who saw her son as a liability, the idea of a workplace that saw him as simply part of her, life seemed too good to be true. I need you to know, she said carefully. Danny has good days and bad days. Sometimes he has meltdowns. Sometimes he needs me in the middle of an important call or meeting. I understand if that's a problem. Grace smiled. Ms. Chen, let me tell you about Tommy Rodriguez, who I mentioned earlier. He's one of our senior software engineers, and his daughter Lucia has cerebral palsy and intellectual disabilities. Last month, during our biggest client presentation of the year, Lucia's aide called in sick, and she had to come to the office. Halfway through Tommy's presentation, Lucia had a seizure. Amelia's breath caught. You know what happened? Our CEO stopped the meeting, helped Tommy get Lucia the medical attention she needed, and then rescheduled the presentation for the following week. When the clients asked why, he told them that taking care of our employees' families is what makes us the kind of company they want to do business with.
You got the contract?
That actually happened? That's who we are, Ms. Chen. That's the culture Marcus has built. Frankly, parents like you and Tommy make us better at what we do because you understand that accessibility isn't just about compliance or even compassion. It's about recognizing that diversity of experience creates stronger solutions for everyone. Danny had moved even closer and was now standing beside his mother's chair, his small hand resting on her arm. It was his way of offering comfort when he sensed her emotions were overwhelming, a gesture that never failed to astound her with its intuitive kindness. When would you need an answer? Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Take all the time you need, Grace replied. But I should mention that Marcus has also established what he's calling the Family First Fund. Emergency support for employees dealing with childcare crises, medical expenses, or other challenges that arise when you're raising a child with special needs. It's part of his commitment to ensuring that no parent should ever have to choose between their child's well-being and their livelihood. As Grace gathered her things to leave, she handed Amelia a folder containing the formal job offer and benefit details. "There's one more thing," she said. "Marcus wanted me to give you this." She handed Amelia a handwritten note on simple white paper. In neat, careful script it read, "Your strength in protecting your son while maintaining your dignity inspired me more than you know. My brother needed someone like you in his corner when we were children. Danny is lucky to have you as his advocate. I hope you'll consider allowing Whitfield Technologies to advocate for both of you." Marcus Whitfield, after Grace left Amelia, sat in her quiet apartment, Danny once again absorbed in his block patterns, and read the note 3 more times. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her love for her son wasn't something she had to hide or apologize for, but something that made her valuable, respected, and wanted. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside apartment 4B, a mother and son sat together in the possibility of tomorrow, and for the first time in a very long time, tomorrow looked bright. Building dreams 2 months into her new position at Whitfield Technologies, Amelia Chen found herself in a conference room she never could have imagined entering, not as someone cleaning it or serving coffee, as a key participant in shaping company policy. Around the mahogany table sat Marcus Whitfield himself, Grace Kim, and Dr. Patricia Wells, a developmental pediatrician Marcus had recently brought on as a consultant. "The numbers are remarkable," Dr. Wells was saying, gesturing to charts displayed on the wall-mounted screen. "Since implementing the Integrated Support Program, we've seen a 40% increase in employee retention among parents of children with disabilities, and productivity metrics have improved across all departments." Amelia still felt slightly surreal sitting in these meetings. But Marcus had made it clear from her first day that her perspective wasn't just welcome, it was essential. "We can read all the research in the world," he told her, "but you live this reality every day. That makes you our most valuable consultant. The success stories are what really matter," Amelia added, pulling up her own presentation. "Take the Henderson family. When Maria started here 3 months ago, her son Jason had been expelled from 2 schools for behavioral issues related to his ADHD. Now he's thriving in our therapeutic program. And Maria's performance reviews are outstanding because she's not constantly worried about getting called to handle a crisis." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. It changed over these past months, Amelia noticed. The intimidating corporate titan she'd glimpsed in newspaper articles had been replaced by someone more thoughtful, more present. She'd learned from Grace that he'd started attending autism awareness seminars and had even begun volunteering at a local adaptive sports program. "Which brings us to the next phase," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet intensity she'd come to associate with his most ambitious ideas. "James, you want to walk us through the foundation proposal?" James Mitchell, a soft-spoken man with prematurely gray hair and kind eyes. Kay joined the team specifically to coordinate what Marcus was calling his most important venture yet. He pulled up architectural renderings that took Amelia's breath away. "The Danny Chen Foundation for Family Support," James began, and Amelia felt her heart skip a beat. "A comprehensive resource center that combines childcare, therapeutic services, parent education, and employment training, all under one roof." The images on the screen showed a beautiful modern building with wide, accessible corridors, sensory-friendly lighting, and spacious rooms designed specifically for children with varying needs. Gardens provided outdoor therapeutic spaces, while state-of-the-art equipment filled therapy rooms. "Marcus," Amelia whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "You named it after Danny?" "Danny represents every child who deserves better than what our society currently offers," Marcus replied simply. "Every parent who's been forced to choose between their career and their child's needs. This foundation will ensure that choice becomes obsolete." Dr. Wells leaned forward excitedly. "The model is revolutionary. Instead of scattered services that families have to navigate separately, everything is integrated. A parent can drop their child off for therapeutic programming that's disguised as play, attend a support group or job training session themselves, and pick up their child knowing they've both had their needs met. We're not just talking about childcare, James added. We're creating a community. Siblings without disabilities will have programming too, because they're also affected by these challenges. Grandparents and extended family members can access education and support. A whole family approach. Amelia thought of the countless nights she'd spent researching services for Danny, calling dozens of agencies only to discover waiting lists, insurance barriers, or programs that didn't quite fit his needs. The idea of a single place that understood and supported the entire spectrum of challenges facing families like hers seemed almost too good to be true. The pilot program will launch here in 6 months, Marcus continued, but the ultimate goal is replication. We want to prove this model works, then help communities across the country establish their own versions. What do you need from me? Amelia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We need you to direct it, Marcus said. You'll oversee daily operations, help design programming, train staff, and work with families to ensure we're meeting real needs instead of what we think those needs should be. The room fell silent as Amelia absorbed this information. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling single mother fired for bringing her son to work. Now, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city was asking her to lead a foundation that could transform the lives of countless families. I don't have a degree in social work or nonprofit management, she said quietly. You have something better, Dr. Wells interjected. You have lived experience, natural empathy, and the kind of practical problem-solving skills that can't be taught in graduate school. The families we'll serve need someone who understands their reality, not someone who's studied it from a distance. Besides, Grace added with a smile, we'll provide all the training and support you need. Marcus is particularly good at identifying potential and then creating opportunities for people to grow into it. Over the following weeks, Amelia threw herself into planning the foundation with an energy she hadn't felt since Danny's early years, when she'd fought tirelessly to get him the services he needed. She interviewed dozens of families, documenting their struggles and dreams. She visited existing programs, identifying best practices and gaps in services. She worked with architects to ensure every detail of the building design considered the sensory and mobility needs of children with disabilities. Danny, meanwhile, was flourishing in ways Amelia had never dared hope. The on-site therapeutic program had helped him develop social skills and coping strategies, while the predictable, accepting environment had reduced his anxiety significantly. He'd even made friends, something that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Mama, he said one evening, as she tucked him into bed, Tommy's daddy says you're building a place where all kids can be happy. That's the plan, sweetheart. What? Do you think about that? Danny was quiet for a long moment, his face serious in the way it got when he was processing complex ideas. I think other kids should feel safe like I do now. At the old place, people looked at me funny. You're nobody. Looks at me funny. Amelia kissed his forehead, marveling at his insight. At 8 years old, her son understood something many adults struggled with, that acceptance wasn't about fixing or changing people, but about creating environments where everyone could thrive as they were. The grand opening of the Danny Chen Foundation was scheduled for a sunny Saturday in May. As Amelia walked through the completed building the evening before, she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. The sensory integration room where children could swing and bounce safely, the quiet spaces for kids who needed to decompress, the family room where parents could connect with others who understood their journey. Marcus found her standing in what would become the foundation's main gathering space, tears streaming down her face. Second thoughts? He asked gently. Gratitude, she replied. 6 months ago, I thought my world was ending. Now I'm about to help launch something that could change the world for families like mine. It did change the world, Marcus corrected. I just provided the resources. Your courage that morning at Pinnacles choosing Danny despite the cost, that's what started all of this. That's what reminded me that business success means nothing if we're not using it to lift each other up. As they stood together in the space that would soon welcome its first families, Amelia realized that sometimes the most devastating moments in life are actually doorways, not just to new opportunities, but to discovering strength you never knew you possessed and purposes you never imagined you'd serve. Tomorrow, that door would open for dozens of other families, and the ripple effects of one mother's love would spread far beyond anything she could have dreamed. Ripples of change. 1 year after the Danny Chen Foundation opened its doors, Amelia stood before a packed auditorium at the National Conference on Inclusive Family Support, preparing to deliver the keynote address that would change her life yet again. In the audience sat legislators, nonprofit directors, corporate executives, and most importantly to her, dozens of parents whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's work. 18 months ago, Amelia began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I was fired for bringing my autistic son to work when childcare fell through. Today I'm here to tell you that moment of supposed failure became the catalyst for a revolution in how we support families facing extraordinary challenges. In the third row she spotted Lisa Parker, a woman whose story had become one of Amelia's most treasured success stories. Lisa had arrived at the foundation 6 months earlier, newly divorced and struggling to care for her twin boys, one neurotypical, one with Down syndrome. Stress had been overwhelming. Logan needed constant medical appointments and specialized therapies, while his brother Carter felt increasingly invisible and resentful of the attention his twin received. The foundation's holistic approach had transformed their entire family dynamic. Logan thrived in the therapeutic programming, while Carter discovered his gift for helping other children through the peer support program. Lisa, meanwhile, completed a medical coding certification program during her son's therapy sessions and now worked remotely for a healthcare company, a job that provided both financial stability and the flexibility her family needed. The traditional model asks families to navigate dozens of separate systems, Amelia continued, each with different eligibility requirements, waiting lists, and philosophical approaches.
Wow.
We asked a different question. What if all the support a family needs could be found in one place, coordinated by people who understand that a child's disability affects every member of the family? From the back of the auditorium, Marcus Whitfield watched with quiet pride as Amelia outlined the foundation's expansion plans. 7 cities had already committed to establishing their own chapters, with funding secured for 12 more. The model was proving not just emotionally successful, but economically sustainable, crucial factor for long-term viability. But the real measure of success, Marcus knew, sat in the audience itself. Parents who'd found community and support, children who'd discovered their potential, siblings who'd learned they mattered too, extended families who'd gained tools to help rather than hinder. I want to tell you about David Chen, Amelia said, her voice softening as she spoke about her brother. For years, David saw my son Danny as a burden I'd chosen to bear alone. He loved us, but he didn't understand why I couldn't just ... make things easier for myself. David shifted uncomfortably in his front row seat, still processing the transformation. In his own thinking that had occurred over the past year, watching Amelia build something meaningful from what had seemed like devastation, seeing Danny flourish in an environment designed for his success, had fundamentally changed how he viewed disability and family responsibility. Last month, David took a new position as Director of Inclusive Hiring for a major corporation. His first initiative was establishing on-site support services for employees with disabled family members. When I asked him what changed his perspective, he said, "I realize that Danny isn't your burden, he's your superpower. And families like ours aren't problems to be solved, but communities to be supported." The applause was thunderous, but Amelia held up her hand for quiet. She had more to say, and these final words would be the most important of her entire speech. This work has taught me that extraordinary circumstances don't create extraordinary people, they reveal the extraordinary capacity that exists within all of us. Every parent in this room who has advocated for their child, who has fought systems that weren't designed for your family's reality, who has chosen love over convenience, you are already change makers. You just needed someone to recognize it and provide you with the platform to transform that private strength into public impact. Dr. Patricia Wells, who had become not just a colleague but a dear friend, felt tears gathering in her eyes as she listened. The foundation had exceeded every metric they'd established for success, but more importantly, it had proven that when you provide families with comprehensive support, they don't just survive, they flourish in ways that benefit entire communities. The foundation's research was already influencing policy at the state level. Corporate America was beginning to understand that inclusive family support wasn't just morally right, but economically smart. Universities were revising their social work and education curricula to include the integrated support model. After her speech, Amelia was surrounded by parents, professionals, and policymakers eager to learn more about replicating the foundation's work in their own communities. But the conversation that would stay with her longest came from an unexpected source, Ms. Chen. The voice belonged to a teenager, perhaps 15 years old, with the confident bearing of someone who'd grown up advocating for herself. "I'm Jennifer Williams. My mom brought me because she thought I should hear your story. It's wonderful to meet you, Jennifer. What did you think?" "I have cerebral palsy," Jennifer said matter-of-factly. "Growing up, my mom always apologized too. People when I needed accommodations, or when my equipment got in the way. She never meant to make me feel like a burden, but I absorbed that message anyway." Amelia nodded, understanding immediately where this conversation was heading. "Your speech made me realize something. My mom didn't need to apologize for me. The world needed to apologize for not being ready for me. As people like you and Mr. Whitfield are making sure my little brother won't grow up in a world that sees his autism as an inconvenience." "Your little brother has autism?" "Yeah. And because of places like your foundation, my parents aren't stressed all the time anymore. Which means they have energy to help me with college applications and to actually listen when I tell them about my dreams, instead of just worrying about my challenges." That night, in her hotel room, overlooking the city where her journey had begun, Amelia video called Danny, who was staying with his Uncle David for the weekend. At 9 years old, he was articulate in ways that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. Confident in his own skin, and excitedly planning his participation in the Foundation's summer camp program. "Mama, did you tell them about the playground we're building?" he asked, referring to the Foundation's latest project, a fully inclusive playground designed by and for children with disabilities. "I mentioned it. What do you want me to make sure?" "They know?" Danny thought carefully, his face serious in the way that always preceded his most profound observations. "Tell them that it's not a special playground for kids like me. It's a playground where all kids can play together and nobody has to feel left out." As Amelia ended the call and prepared for bed, she reflected on the impossible distance they'd traveled from that humiliating morning at Pinnacle Consulting. The Foundation now employed 47 people, served over 300 families, and had inspired policy changes that would affect thousands more. But the real victory was simpler and more profound than any statistic could capture. Danny no longer thought of himself as different in a way that made him less valuable. He thought of himself as different in a way that made him uniquely capable of helping create a more inclusive world. And that shift in perspective from burden to gift, from problem to solution, from disability to different ability was spreading far beyond the Foundation's walls. The ripple effects of kindness, Amelia had learned, are immeasurable. They touch lives you'll never know about, inspire changes you'll never see, and create possibilities that exceed your wildest dreams. Sometimes the most important work you'll ever do begins with the worst day you've ever had. If you're brave enough to let that day teach you who you really are and what the world really needs, outside her hotel window, the city sparkled with infinite potential, and somewhere in that vast network of lights, other mothers were tucking their children into bed, whispering promises about tomorrow that they weren't sure they could keep. But because of what had started with one moment of courage, one act of recognition, and one decision to transform personal pain into public purpose, those promises were becoming a little more possible every day.